So we are delighted this evening to welcome representatives from the Group Violence Intervention Delaware organization. Give us some background on the formation of the group, the principles involved in the work being done, the accomplishments to date, the work that remains, potentially ways that people in the community might become involved in helping to limit gun violence in the city of Wilmington. As background, Justin and Brian, Lynn Keelhorn, Mike Ganade, and I are the co-founders at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Wilmington of our Peace and Justice Work Group that was formed in the spring of 2018 with the twin goals of combating violence in Wilmington and promoting racial justice. And so that's work that we have been doing for more than 6 years. Fairly early on in the process, we had a series of community speaker events. We began with Father Gregory Boyle from Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, a gang intervention program. And one of our early speakers was David Kennedy, author of the book Don't Shoot, and a proponent of the approach to preventing gun violence that I believe is incorporated into the work of GVI in Wilmington. So we are delighted to have been involved from the beginning in hopefully helping to make a difference in the situation in our city. And we're looking forward to learning about what you have done in the creation of this organization, where you stand, the work ahead, and ways we might be involved. So I'll turn it over to you, Justin.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Get some thumbs up. We're good to go. Nice, awesome. Okay, and thank you for the introduction, Sue. And for those, I know there may be some people that are familiar with GVI, and for those who aren't, we're looking forward to being able to teach something. And if you guys have any questions, at any point, you can either cut us off, ask a question, you can put it in the chat, kind of whatever works better. We're just going to make this a very, in a sense, informal. So again, if you have any questions at any point, just let us know. So for those that don't know, my name is Justin Watson. I'm GVI's Newcastle County Senior Community Engagement Coordinator, and I'm joined by Brian Aiken, who is Kent County's Senior Community Engagement Coordinator. Okay, so first we're going to start with our leadership team. Our director of the GVI is John Cook. Deputy Director is Javar Simpson. Our Program Administrator is Valerie Cannon. The Community Relations Administrator is Dr. Shaunia Ellis. Department of Justice Community Specialist Corey Priest. He works directly with GVI as well. He does a lot of great work, and we partner a lot of events with the Department of Justice as well. And actually, also, we just had a meeting with our Leaders in Transition team, which will be at the end of the presentation, but just seeing his name there made me think of that. So I'll be sure to talk about that some more. And then our Newcastle County team supervisors, Gloria Benton and John Garley, and our Kent County team supervisor, Ms. Sheila Suther. Okay, so for today's discussion, presentation, we're going to go over what is GVI for the people that don't know, some partnership implementation. We're going to do an overview of our service provisions, the support and outreach program vision, community engagement. We're going to give you some operations data. I'm going to talk more in Leaders in Transition. If we have some time at the end, we're going to do a brief question and answer. Okay, so again, you don't have to come off the unmute, but if by a show of hands, who has heard or has dealt with, not dealt with, but who has heard of GVI before tonight? Okay, so I see we have at least one. Let me scroll down. Okay, nice. Okay, so we have at least 2 or 3 hands. So there's a common misconception about GVI. When you first hear it and you hear some of the work we do, some people think it stands for gun violence intervention. Other people think it stands for gang violence intervention. but the name of our program is Group Violence Intervention. And using the term group instead of gun or gang, it's very intentional, because in certain parts of Delaware, more traditional gangs, they're not really prevalent. It's more let's say, like, if a group of kids or young men from one area or isolated block may have an issue with another group from another area or isolated block. They're not technically a gang, but they're a group of 3 or 4 young men that come together. And all of the violent crimes may not be gun violence. So by using the term group violence, it covers a lot more, and it kind of just it kind of avoids us from being kind of stuck in one lane, and we can work with a lot more young men and women in the communities. So GVI, we serve participants who are young men and women who have a criminal justice background. We get referrals from our law enforcement partners, and the majority of our participants either have committed a violent act or they're likely to be victims of a violent act, all within the realm of the group violence or the group and their affiliates. We provide intensive case management for our participants, and that's provided by our youth life coaches and master case managers, which are just our case managers for both of those. We champion the trauma-informed approach when serving our participants and their families. And GVI is a collaborative effort of 3 parts, which Brian will get into a little bit further in the presentation. But it's law enforcement, the community as a whole, and then support and outreach. So the support and outreach branch of GVI, that's what Brian and I are here to present today. We're an elite team of social workers and clinicians. We have 10 master case managers and 7 youth life coaches, and we're constantly always hiring people because we're always getting more participants. So the more our client base grows, obviously we'll need more case managers. And what's really special about our case managers is the second bullet point there. There's a diversity of education and life experience. Not all the case managers have the education background, but what makes us really unique and special is they may have the lived experience that can lend to the participants. And a lot of the times, the best person to speak to someone and to try to teach them is someone who's lived in their shoes and they've been through and seen some of the things that the participants have seen. So of course, we're trauma responsive. GVI it's really close to being a 24/7 job. We kind of always have to be available for them, for the participants. We help their families. So if we have let's say a 16-year-old who has unstable housing, we would have to go into his household to help his parents, help his, say if he has younger siblings, we have to help a whole household. So it's intensive therapeutic case management. And of course, we're passionate about community change, and you're going to see a lot more of the community work we do as we progress through the slides.
So the key messages here to pass along is that as an organization, we communicate clear messages with coordinated action to group members. So think of it as a 3-legged stool or 3-pronged stool. So each leg provides support to the other, which in turn provides support to everything. That involves being a moral voice for the community, meaning we let participants know their actions are negatively affecting our community, not just theirs, but our community. From a social service perspective, our state organizations do everything we can to help our participants for as long as they need it, which typically can run on an average of 18 to 24 months. So we're talking 2 years roughly of intensive case management. And in some cases, it lasts even longer than that because our case managers develop relationships with our clients. And I use the word client loosely. I would categorize it more as family members because they become family. And folks wind up developing connections, and that 2 years stretches into 4 and beyond. And finally, from a law enforcement perspective, law enforcement, they have a job to do. And their message is more practical and more direct, which is if you continue committing crimes, the person involved, as well as their group, as well as the gang, the entire gang, will all go to prison for the same amount of time. So if it's not one strike against you or 3 strikes and you're out and it's against you, but it's across the board. So everyone that's involved with you will get the same amount of time. So as I mentioned, you have that 3-pronged approach. And it takes 3 different types of community partners to make this work. And as I mentioned, there's law enforcement. I mean, because law enforcement, they are who they are. And you also have social services, as I mentioned, and that, you have organizations that are involved with us, like the Division of Health and Social Services. And lastly, it's the community at large. You have community organizations, influential community leaders. You have churches, that are involved with us as well, because it takes a community, it takes a village to combat an issue like violence. So the great thing that I personally appreciate about GBI is that we have a no handoff policy. That means we work directly with public and private partners to help assist our family members. And these partners range from state partners like the Department of Justice, as we mentioned, Corey, who works with us, who does a phenomenal job, to the Division of Motor Vehicles, because when you think about it, a lot of folks out here don't have a driver's license. They don't have basic needs. So if they don't have a driver's license, we walk them step by step through the process to make sure they get a driver's license. To community behavioral health providers, which is important because, growing up in the inner city, there's a lot of issues that aren't addressed because you're taught to overlook it, or you just don't have the necessary funds to support getting the right behavioral health treatment. And we also, one important factor, we provide transitional and at times permanent housing, and which is key because in some cases you have individuals that may be on the run. They, may be wanted not just, by folks in their particular neighborhood. They may be gang warring with someone else, so they need a place to stay comfortably, whether it's them or their family. And we look out for everybody, so we don't turn anyone away in that regard. And again, we also really try to connect with community organizations as well as houses of worship. Now, before I get into service provisions, I'd like to put to the floor, what are some of the barriers that may not be listed here, or some of the challenges that you come across in your day-to-day? Sue?
Yeah, Brian, excuse me. I think that it would be helpful to share the principles behind group violence intervention. I think some people here tonight know what that is and some do not. The idea that much of the violence that's committed is done by a small or identifiable group of people. And if there's a way to identify them and work with them and engage law enforcement, wraparound services. So I think kind of a grounding in how do you pick the people? Is this a broad program that applies to everyone who lives in the city? Is it focused on a group likely to commit violence? Just so that we understand kind of the basis for the program.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely focused on individuals that are likely to commit violence, and they're sort of referred to us by parole and probation. So these are the individuals that they say we think they, based off of what they've done, the crimes they've committed. These are the individuals I think you guys need to help us steer on the right track. And that's due to them having an ongoing history of violence, an ongoing history of, committing crimes, dangerous crimes in many cases.
Yeah. And so that's actually a really good question. And I think the next slide kind of really explains that a little bit deeper. So this is our
I should have let you keep talking.
No, that's perfect.
Go right ahead.
That's the perfect transition. A good question. So this is our service delivery model. And to kind of answer that question is, unlike other state agencies that or just other agencies in general, GVI, in a sense, we don't really have a open door policy. And what I mean by that is, of course, we're accepting and we try to help everyone with services that we can, but it's not like you can just come off the street and say, actually, let me give you an example. When I table events and I explain what GVI is and what our goals are, we'll have people in the community that'll say, oh yeah, my nephew or my son or a friend of mine is kind of going down that wrong path and he needs a program like this. The work that we do, as you can see in phase one, we get referrals from our law enforcement partners. So all the participants that are currently in our program already are on the level of being, I don't want to say known, but they're already actively involved in some of the violent acts. Or like I said earlier, they can be the victim of something. But it's really those who are already group affiliated, or they're already in a gang, or better, or just to kind of easily explain it, they're already in that group, and we trying to work with them while they're in the midst of it, like while they're in the heat of some of the activities that they're doing. So this is a step-by-step model of our case management. And of course, in the profession we're in, it's never really textbook. This is kind of what we follow, but of course, things change and we have to just work with every participant individually. So just before I really get into that, did that kind of answer your question, or like, do you need any more of a little bit of explanation based off that?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. So just going back over phase one. So support and outreach receives the referrals from multidisciplinary law enforcement intel group. So again, that can be probation and parole. If it's Dover PD or Wilmington PD, who, they may have some intel on a group of young men or women who are likely to commit a crime, they'll then come together, meet with us, and we'll go right into phase two. And that's the message delivery. And the two ways that we deliver the message are through call-ins and custom notifications. And some may ask, what's the message? The message is the violence has to end. And these acts that you're committing, they're damaging the community and they're tearing us apart from the inside. So we will have a call-in event, which I'll explain in the next few slides, as well as the custom notification, which I'll also explain. We have a slide for that. So the phase three are the services are accepted. So once services are accepted, they get matched with a youth life coach or a case manager. And again, just because we're working with the individual, we still work with their families. If they have children, we help obtain childcare. And those are what the core life functioning assessment and the individual service plan are. It's just all of the onboarding paperwork that we have to do with our participants. And it's funny because some people may think it's invasive to a sense, but that's not our goal. Our goal is just to know exactly where you are at this stage of your life, what you're missing, why you're missing certain things. For a quick example, we have people who come in and the first thing they say is we need employment. Like, I need a job, I haven't had a job. So of course we write that down. All right, well, it needs employment, but let's go a little bit deeper. Do you mind, like, can I make a copy of your birth certificate or your state ID? And they may say, well, I don't have an ID, or I don't have a birth certificate, or I can't find my like whatever the case may be, my social security card. So that just goes to show that there's like always kind of a um deeper thing we have to address before we address the first thing. And once we get those three things and then you get employment, then there's something after that. Like, there's always constantly work that needs to be done with these young men and women. So the next after that is phase 4, and that's progression through the support and outreach level system and the stabilization and cognitive restructuring. So that's literally just the intensive case management. We're working with them, and I think maybe it's in the next slide, but we talk about a no exit policy. And it sounds kind of harsh, like a no exit policy, like there's no way out of GVI. But really what that means is, unlike other state agencies where we may just refer someone out if they need their ID, we're walking them through every step. We're teaching them how to, like, we're literally changing their mindset on how to get things done and just to take some initiative and, step up as the adult and the leader in your community. So the next phase after that is engagement and LIT, and that LIT stands for Leaders in Transition. So if you guys hear me say LIT, I might say it a few more times. It stands for Leaders in Transition, and that's a work group we have within GVI for the participants, and they do activities. As I mentioned earlier, they did like Dover Community Day. It's just different activities they do, and it goes hand in hand with phase 6, which are advocacy, mentoring, and just different community events that the participants kind of take for themselves, and they show their growth, honestly, and it's really great to see. So next is our program vision, and this is for our support and outreach and our case management. We like to think of it on like an 18 to 24-month transformation. So as you can see, there's engagement, internalization, and the culmination. So the engagement is the beginning of the case management. This is when they get matched with the case manager or youth life coach. It's a holistic support to the household. And that's where, as you can see there, the no exit policy. That's just literally, we just constantly work with them. It may not be every day, but I can guarantee the case managers are checking in at least weekly with the participants, just to make sure that the things that they're working towards, they're not going backwards. And then next is internalization. So that's life mapping and navigation, goal attainment, transformative travel, community involvement, advocacy, and restorative justice activities. So to kind of answer your question about what our principles are really that they already have the leadership skills within them. They have the potential. They have all of the tools to be a productive part of society. But because of their environment, they may have made choices. They may have made choices. And that's kind of where we come in, just to show them that just because you're at this point in your life, there is turning back in a sense. Like, but let's work through it. Let's write down some of your goals. Let's get you involved in the community once we feel that you're at that level where you can go back into the communities. And then following that is the culmination. And that's just graduation in a sense. That's just pretty much where I said, we're not going to be talking to you every day, but you may have got to the point where we can talk to you every month, or we're still checking in with you, but you're at the point of sustainability where we kind of don't have to, I don't like saying hold your hand, but we can take the training wheels off, loosen up the training wheels a little bit and let you kind of just go off on your own. So long-term advocacy, which is leaders in transition, and then restorative justice activities. So a custom notification, that is one of the ways that we deliver the message of GVI, and it's the personal introduction. Well, there's a personal introduction, there's a group introduction, which is a call, and I'll get into next, but this is the personal. We're GVI leaders in law enforcement. We go either into somewhere in the community, whether it's a McDonald's or a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts, we go and we meet, and we meet them where they're comfortable, or we even go in their homes. We meet with their families if they're underage, and we just tell them like, there's a reason that we're coming to you. Law enforcement, and again, we work directly with law enforcement. So law enforcement is transparent. Like this young man or woman is doing this, that, and other things within the community. And this is where we come to them and tell them what the path you're going on is not the way, and we want to help you. It's easy just to kind of say, well, what you're doing isn't good and you need to change your ways. But we also want to provide the services for them. And we want you to bring you in, like Brian said, we want to bring you into this family just to show you that people care. And it takes all of us on this call want a violence-free Delaware, but it takes the people within those communities and who live in those communities and knock on, and have brothers and sisters and cousins. It takes them to change their ways and set the example for the youth. And that's kind of where the custom notification comes in. It's just a one-on-one personal message. And contrary to that is our call-in. And we actually have a call-in coming up October, excuse me, let me just double check the date. I believe it's October 16th. And that's the group introduction. So that's where our law enforcement partners, Dover Police Department, Wilmington Police Department, depending on where we are, some probation and parole, they're all there. And we're all pretty much standing together in a sense for the calling. GVI staff as well as community figures are also involved. And this is where those key messages that Brian mentioned earlier, this is where we really hammer them home. The community talks about the things that are happening in the community and how we need change and how we need to reduce the violence. GVI support and outreach will offer the services. We'll tell you, we understand your past, but we want to help you for a brighter future, and we'll provide services. But law enforcement's message is telling them we know exactly who you are. And if you choose to keep doing what you're doing, if you don't work with GVI, you don't choose within yourself to make better decisions, we'll persecute and we'll make sure that you and your whole group can't harm the community anymore. So it's kind of like in a sense a good cop, bad cop situation where they're telling them the honest truth about what will happen if they continue to work and keep doing what they're doing. And GVI is agreeing with them, and we're telling you, like, yeah, law enforcement is serious, but this is in a sense a second chance. And this is where you can accept services and work with GVI and change your life, or you can keep going down the same path and you'll end up exactly where they're telling you. And again, if anyone has any questions, please cut me off. If I'm talking too fast, just raise your hand, let me know. Yes, I see one question. You can unmute and ask if you'd like. Yeah, I see one question.
I just was curious what your restorative justice piece of the program looks like. Like, could you give us an example of what
Yeah. So
that would be?
and I'm gonna show, there's at the end of the presentation, we have a few photos that just to show you some of the work they're doing within the communities. But well, there's a couple examples. I can give you two really quick. One is the Ferris School. There's some young men within the Ferris School who were having a dispute, and they were kind of going back and forth with each other. And we had some of our leaders in transition members, or they were requested to go into the Ferris School and speak to the young men. They spoke with them individually, and then they brought them together, and they just explained like what you're doing it's kind of pointless. And they said by the end of the meeting, they had the two feuding groups shaking hands and realizing. And a funny story about that, what they told me is two of the opposite groups were family, like they were cousins, they were family. And they kind of broke down, like, and kind of talked to each other like, man, I missed you and we haven't, but you would never know that. So as that's a little bit. And another one is that with the Department of Justice, the prosecutors, they actually met with the leaders in transition, who some of them have been prosecuted by that same group within the Department of Justice. But it's powerful when, and we have a photo of that later, and I'll point that out to you guys, but it's powerful when they can come together and they can talk to them some things, and they realize that, wait, you guys aren't against us. Like, it's just that they have to protect the community as well. And then also on the other end, where the leaders in transition spoke their piece, and like they understood each other, and it was a really powerful event. So that's just a few, like, as far as the restorative justice, and we're continuing to work within the community. And we're empowering our participants to lead it, and we're kind of just following behind them and letting them, run point on some of the things that we're doing within the community. So
Hey, thank you.
yeah, of course.
Now, some of the community engagement initiatives we've done, and this just kind of highlights 2023 and what we've done this year. We conducted the GVI Community Collaborative, which is a work group with our community partners that meets once a month to introduce ideas on how to work better together. There's also the Call to Action, which is a virtual meeting designed to provide updates and expectations and what we expect or are looking for the community's role within the call-in. We have also the Resource Expo, which is where we invite community organizations to table and invite participants and the public to come give resources, along with mentoring, which is ongoing in various community events. And then we have upcoming things later on this year, like we have a Rock the Vote event that's coming up very soon. I have a event in October, on October 10th, called Unite, Engage, Empower, where we're bringing folks together in Kent County, but you're more than welcome to come too. But we're bringing folks together in Kent County to introduce myself, since I'm new to the group, but also really highlight the work we're doing down there and try to bring people together and engage the community and bring community organizations together.
Oh, and just also just to kind of speak on some community engagement, we had a Peace in the Streets event in May within one of the communities of Wilmington, and it was a great community event. We had like the bouncy houses for the children, and we had barbecue, and we had a stage for some people from the community to perform music. So it was a really good event, and we're always looking to go into communities. And another kind of speaking a little bit about the restorative justice in a sense here. We had members who are a part of our program who were in communities that they probably, say, 4 or 5 years ago, they would never go to. So we kind of we're just working with the participants and within the community, and we're kind of healing it from the inside out.
And to piggyback off of that, Justin and I attended a book bag giveaway right before the start of school that was put together by Corey Priest. And we both met a gentleman from AA. And as we were talking, we didn't think about the importance or the impact that alcoholism has on our society and how it could help GVI. And he, the gentleman we met, I think his name was Ken. He was very just welcoming and very willing to be a part of what we're doing, and provided examples of how he could immediately help. Like if there's a gentleman that, needed a lift somewhere, that he would provide, driving services, just to get him out the house, because that's a part of his treatment. So you can see how, that community impact, communities working together can help everyone. And then here's an example of data that supports the work we do on a daily basis.
Oh,
so
Brian, not to cut you off, but I see Norm and Judy have raised their hand. You guys have a question or?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
I was just wondering what the caseload is for a case manager, and also is there a Sussex County component?
That's a good question. As far as our case management, well, you can actually see here in the data, we have about 330 participants.
Got it.
So you were on the ball. You were right there, transitioning right into that. But yeah, we have 330 participants, of which we have 233 in Newcastle. And out of that, we have 13 case managers, of which 7 are master case managers and 6 are youth life coaches. So you're looking at about a 24-to-1 ratio. In Kent County, we have 97 participants with 4 case managers, of which 3 are master case managers and 1 youth life coach. So the average participation, you have 1 person to every 24 people.
Okay.
We're working on expanding, getting more case managers on board in Kent County, and then eventually spreading to Sussex. We started in Newcastle first, and then just started working our way south.
Okay.
When
Thank
you talk about number of participants, have each of those been referred to GVI by law enforcement, or are some have been referred and others are kind of part of the atmosphere or environment in which they operate? Are those all referrals?
Yes, so those are all referrals
Thank you.
into the program. Yeah. Okay, so now this is a little bit about Leaders in Transition. And as I mentioned earlier, where our Leaders in Transition met with prosecutors, this is a picture taken where you can kind of see them all in a circle, and they're literally just looking at one person, just telling their story or asking questions. This was probably one of the best meetings I've been a part of. I mean, you can kind of see me in the back there. I'm not really in the circle, but I'm just listening to everything that's like the conversation that's going on, and it was extremely powerful. So a little bit about Leaders in Transition, and this is kind of what sorry guys. This is what I just want to be kind of clear about with Leaders in Transition. As you saw on the slide before, there's 330 members in GVI. There's only about, I think it's 48 is the exact number of Leaders in Transition. This is more of, well, we believe that all of our participants have the leadership qualities within them, but these are the participants that have shown it, and they're at that point where they can have meetings with prosecutors, or they can go and host community events. So these are our leaders within GVI, and they have repurposed their leadership from their previous lives into impacting the community positively. So like they like I said, they do community events. As I mentioned before, they go into the Ferris School and advocate, and they tell their stories. They just started a podcast recently, and they kind of just, again, they get to be a little loose and tell their stories and speak their opinions about certain things. But it all just goes back to their growth and how far they've come and where they are now. So, and next slide are just some photos just to show you some of the things.
Well, he did have a battery low on his computer show up, so
Right. Hopefully he'll be able to get back in.
Yeah,
I don't think that was me. Mine is fully charged, so. But I did check.
Brian, you're muted.
But there we go. But to echo Justin's point, that particular meeting, I actually took that photo, and what's powerful about this group is that you see individuals who not only fully turn their lives around, but in terms of talking about lit, not only have they turned their lives around, but they're now leaders in their own right. And then they're leading the charge to make a difference, to change the narrative, to change the course in a lot of individuals' lives. So they're sort of like those additional case managers themselves, if you really think about it. They're able to go in the community, talk directly to individuals who aren't doing what they're supposed to, and counsel them and help get them on the right track. So for me, to explain myself, I actually I have a news background. So I worked in news production, journalism. I covered stories. I produced newscasts, and to write about the stories, to write about the blood and guts, and now to be on this side of the coin where you physically get to see the individuals committing crimes, but then you get to hear the stories of them who really want to make a difference, who want to change their lives, who are kind of forced to do it for whatever reason, whether it's poverty, whether it's condition being in a particular neighborhood, and they really want the opportunity to change. And that's what GVI does. It does that intensive case management where we meet people where they are to find out what's wrong, what's the problem, how do we help you? You need a driver's license, done. Social security card, done. Birth certificate, done. You know, so we, in essence, create a no excuse policy. There's no excuse, you know, for you to, you know, right the ship here and get your life in order. And we have those physical examples in the lit group, and we have physical examples on our team, and we have passionate folks like myself who want to help, who just want to make a difference. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Marge, you had your hand up?
Yes.
I'm wondering a couple things. One is how are you funded? And the program sounds to me like a comprehensive approach to changing people's lives, but it is a population that has already gotten in trouble and is referred to by the justice system. So I'm wondering if, along with how you are funded, is there any talk of expanding this program to a wider population as a preventive program rather than restorative program?
I believe so. I think that, and this is just my opinion, I believe that it's trending that way. But to explain GVI, this was sort of an idea created by a former Wilmington Police Chief, Robert Tracy. And now it's a national program. And actually, the Delaware branch is the largest branch in the nation. So we have the largest branch, and we're growing every day. Like I just sent Director Cook a resume of a young lady who's going to apply for a psychologist position on our team, where we can actually provide, you know, psychological help, an intensive person for them to listen to. So it's a large program that's constantly growing daily, and we have the full support of the state. We have the full support of the governor on that too. But I see Justin's back. Justin, you want to chime in?
Oh, first I want to say,
Can you address the funding?
Yes.
How you're funding?
Justin, you want to jump in on that?
sorry, what was, I apologize. Can you ask?
She was just asking about funding, like how we're funded.
Okay, so we are a state agency. I know we also had the ARPA grant that funded the majority of our programming and also our expansion into Dover. So that's some of our funding, but again, I said like we're a state agency, so it comes from the state of Delaware as well.
And under what department? Under what part of the budget?
It's so we work directly with, we're under Health and Social Services. Yeah, so we're on the social service aspect of like the state agencies and programming.
Peggy.
Yeah, my question was sort of like where Marge was going. When I told my husband I was going to get on the Zoom call, we've both been teachers in Virginia, and I'm involved with the Delaware schools here, but more like as a substitute teacher. But having programs, you're very targeted for these individuals, but having programs for all the students to learn like how to de-escalate and how to intervene, so you have like student leaders and influencers, that it's just taught to everybody. If there's a way to get something like that done. I mean, obviously, we have this shooting again just yesterday impacting, so many lives. I mean, the trauma of just being there, not just the horrible, what happened to the victims. And it just affects everybody.
I think that the one great thing about our group is that we're constantly evolving. And I think you make a very good point in while we're established in the reactive side of this problem, we could also take the proactive approach by, to your point, going into those schools, meeting with different organizations early on to speak positively into the students that are in schools right now, to try to make a difference early on as opposed to just responding to the problem after it happens.
And also, to that point, I think that's where the leaders in transition have kind of stepped up, because of a lot of, like Brian said, we're on the reactive side of it, but with leaders in transition, they've been doing a anti-violence in school campaign. So they've been to maybe 6 or 7 schools already, and they just get the chance to tell their stories, and they explain to the youth how if they could go back and change certain things that they would never be in the position they're in now. So of course our program needs to, which we have been, to its credit, we've been on the more preventative side, and it's starting with lit. They've kind of hit the ground running, and they've been really in the schools and different community centers, just giving the same messaging, but more on the preventative side.
Right. I didn't mean necessarily your group, because you obviously do great work, but if the environment is right for this and you're getting funded through state agencies, through Health and Human Services, I mean, what wasn't the Surgeon General saying, gun violence is one of the top health priorities? That if the environment is right and find the money, that this is something that should just be, even in middle school, not just high school.
Clearly, 14-year-olds. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kids can teach, how to de-escalate, and even with bullying, of reach out to these kids, or if they really need serious help, tell somebody.
Thank you, Peggy. Lynn, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. So 5 or so years ago, I was very engaged in this space and going to national conferences and the violent intervention programs and things. And then I pivoted to other types of criminal justice reform. So now I have lots of questions as to what's been happening since I haven't been engaged in this specific space. And I guess my two primary questions are, have there been evaluations done on the program as implemented in Delaware, academic studies, any actual evaluations of the work and its success? So I'm curious about any of that type of work, data analysis or reporting that's been done. And secondly, the program that you describe has a lot of significant differences from what the original founders, being David Kennedy and stuff, had originally proposed and written about. And I'm curious as to whether those changes are based on national recommendations for changes, whether, the David Kennedy et al. Is recommending that things be done differently now because they've learned more and things, are pointing in a different direction, or whether these are just changes that locally in Delaware, we decided we think it'll work better if we do things differently and move away from the original model.
And that's a great question, Lynn. So I think it's a bit of both. And I think that, of course, as I think I kind of mentioned it during the service delivery part of it, that, it's tough at all times to, even though we have a certain like textbook way of doing it, and we have every participant, every single client is different. So I think if certain things have shifted, it's probably just because locally there's might be a little bit of different changes that just affect our participant base a little bit better, and the case management would just be a little bit better as far as on a more local scale than the national network. But I think we still follow as far as like the call in, like we still follow the national network. Um, but with the scale of it at times, I think we may shift in certain directions just to give our participants the best services.
I mean, the original model, the referrals were not supposed to be based on folks who were, coming from parole and probation kind of stuff. And the idea was to, at the call-in, actually present each of the individuals with a binder or folder of information that showed what law enforcement already knew about their involvement in things that they had not yet been charged with.
Right.
And that was what was being used to say, look, we are giving you this option rather than charging you with these things that we know. Here's our evidence. Here's, we know that you did this stuff. But rather than charging you, we are giving you this opportunity, you and your friends, the group that you're participating with, and that if you need to hold each other accountable and use your own peer pressure to hold each other accountable, because if any one of you steps out of line, then we will use this information that we're showing you on each one of you, to charge you for these things. And is that no longer part of the call-in process?
So again, great question. And that is the call-in process. It's slightly shifted. So we probably won't hand them a binder individually because the thing about the call-ins, it's kind of just intense to a certain. I don't want to say that might not be the right word, but it could be intense to a certain way, to a certain level, where you may not always have their attention, or you may have to go a different approach. So one thing that Dan Logan from Department of Justice been doing, he would literally go into he'd have a folder. So instead of him handing out folders to everyone, he'd go into a folder and say, let's say some Justin Watson, if you pick up another gun, it'll be 5 to 7 mandatory, minimum mandatory, no exceptions. So he's literally just going through the list of close to everyone that's there and telling them, we know exactly who you are. Even though you think you may have outsmarted some people, we know what you and your group members are doing. And this is, in a sense, your last warning, or more of this is your second chance to work with GBI. Another thing they've been doing with certain indictments or arrests that they've made, they'll put it during the call-in, they'll have a slideshow, and there'll be familiar faces on the slideshow saying what their charges were and how long other sentences. So it's transitioned a bit, Lynn, from kind of the folders, they'll hand out and say, this is what we know and this is what we have on you, and to just a visual of it, and they just go on to they kind of just move on from it. But I think the message is still being received by the participants.
And how often are these call-ins done? How many participants are invited? And is there a way for us as the community to be involved?
Yes. So the call-ins, I think this is our 4th call-in this year. So I think we usually have around 5 or 6 yearly. Our next call-in is October 16th in Wilmington at the Resurrection Center. And we're always inviting community members. That's what's become a part of the call-in, is showing that the community is behind them, in a sense. Yes, we understand you're here for a reason, and we understand that, but we ultimately need you to change. We can't really tolerate what's been happening. So if I can probably send out the call-in information to Sue, and she can share it with everyone, or however is kind of the easiest way to do it. But we're always everyone on this call is invited to the call, and we would love to have you guys just to see it for yourself and just experience it, through your own perspective.
That would be fine, Justin. Do you track data like dropout rates? I mean, there are people who come into the program, they're participating, but lo and behold, they commit another crime, they're incarcerated, they're no longer part of GBI. Is there any recording of that, publicizing of that in the context of sort of a success rate, if you will?
Yeah. So actually, before I was the senior community engagement coordinator, I was the data analyst. So I know that we had literally stats on. Unfortunately, we had stats on some deaths that may have happened. We had the like recidivism numbers where like say if they had one charge, if they had a charge but it wasn't a gun charge or a violent charge, we kind of took um, we took stats of that. We had obviously the which we called like their social determinants, which was the ID, employment, things of that nature. So we do have them. We worked with Tech Impact and Social Contract, and they really took the numbers and crunched them and made them into the reports. And also, if I can get a hold of that, I can send that to you guys as well to review.
That'd be great. Well, we're near the end of our time. We do try to wrap up pretty close to 8 o'clock. Marge has her hand up. It's not a hard and fast rule. So Marge, go right ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking to thank you for the presentation tonight and all the work that you do, because I was reading something about a recent shooting in Wilmington the other day, and I realized, the public has a collective loss of memory, I think. Back when Wilmington was the so-called murder capital of the world, we all knew every day something was going on. When something's not going on, we don't pay attention. So the work that you do is really important in keeping everybody on the right track and keeping whole communities safer and helping everybody. So I just wanted to say thank you for your work.
Thank you, Marge. Peggy, did you have Peggy and Lynn, quick like a bunny?
Yeah, with there was a term that you used on a couple of the slides that was cognitive restructuring. And you said you had psychologists and therapists working, but can you just give some examples of the kinds of things that you work on with the participants?
Yeah. So just to be quick, I know we had like a clinician that was in office, so we would schedule times with the case manager would schedule a time for them to come in, and maybe for the first time in their lives, they actually sat down with someone and like kind of spoke to some of the things that they've been going through. So I know that's kind of a small thing and a small example to use, but just the fact that they have someone, a professional, not just a friend or a case manager, they have a professional to come in and to pretty much be their therapist, to listen to what they have going on and explain that certain things that they've been through are not normal. And, it kind of takes them to speak to a professional to understand that. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think that gives a good idea of some of the work we've done.
Thank you.
So
Lynn.
I just wanted to connect what Marge brought up in terms of, still when we read about another shooting in Wilmington and stuff, and also the notion that we know that the perpetrators and the victims, there's a lot of significant overlap between them. They're often one and the same kind of group. So I'm curious as to when you read about another shooting that happened in Wilmington, how often do you look at that and say, oh no, that was one of ours that, got away, versus, wow, how were they not on our radar? That wasn't someone who we were working with, and why not? Why didn't we know that was someone we needed to be working with? can you talk a little bit about, how that line of thinking or analysis goes?
Yeah. So that's another good question. And the thing is, there are times there are times when we read certain things and they may be participants, or other times when and what we see often is, because GVI is a voluntary program from the referral for probation and parole, there's times when there are people who decline services who didn't want to work with GVI, and they may find themselves in certain situations that we'll see, and it's just like, we wish that we could have got to them when we could have to avoid it, but ultimately, it's the program is voluntary. We kind of can't force their hands, so it does happen, and I mean, it's really unfortunate, but there is we offer the services, and we just hope that they would accept them, just to avoid some of those things.
So when it's not someone in the program, it's usually someone who was offered the opportunity and declined it, rather than it being just an unknown person where you say, gee, I don't know why we didn't have them on our radar.
Yeah, I wouldn't say all the time, but there are some cases where it's people who just, or I mean, law enforcement or probation and parole, they may know of these people and they just haven't, they weren't suitable for the program for whatever reason. I wouldn't be sure why. Or it could be someone who was in our program, someone who declined. So there's a lot of different, I don't want to just say it was one thing, but there are a multitude of reasons, or a multitude of people and participants who, um, that we just that just still choose certain choices, unfortunately.
Well, Brian and Justin, we really want to thank you very much for being here with us this evening and discussing the program. As we said, we were kind of in on the ground floor of this with David Kennedy's visit to Wilmington and his connection with Chief Tracy and ultimately the Wilmington Police Department. And clearly the work that you're doing is having a profound impact on people in our community. And we are so grateful for the work that we do. And if there's anything that we can do to support your actions or your programs, you certainly have my email address. Please pass the information along, and I would be more than happy to share it with the folks who are here tonight, those who will watch our video later, and others who are part of our network of folks who are fully on board with our Peace and Justice Work Group's mission of combating gun violence in Wilmington and promoting racial justice. So thank you again. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.